Okay, good evening everybody. Welcome to this Facebook live session this evening to talk about our service plan for 2024 to 2028. It's your opportunity this evening to feedback on our consultation that is currently live on the intranet, and hopefully you'll feel able to ask us questions this evening in order to get some answers to any uncertainties that you may have. I'm joined this evening by Natalie and Scott, who will introduce themselves in a moment. But from my perspective, I'm an Assistant Chief Fire Officer with responsibility for a number of areas of service, in particular our prevention activity, which is how we educate the hazards associated with fire to members of the community, but also other hazards that are specific interest to us, such as water safety and road traffic safety. I also have responsibility for protection, which is how we work with businesses to ensure that you're safe in your workplaces. And I also have responsibility for our operational response, which is what most people would associate with the fire service, is all our fire stations and fire engines that members of the public sort of experience in their time of need. As I said, this evening is about our service plan consultation. How we deliver our service to the communities is of utmost importance to us, and what we want to ensure is that you also have the opportunity to contribute to shape our service plan objectives for the time period ahead. Okay, so I'll now just pass over to Scott to introduce himself.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So my name is Scott, and I'm the Corporate Assurance and Planning Manager here at Avon Fire and Rescue Service. Part of my role is to work with the Community Risk Management Planning team as part of our development of the service plan. It's really important for us that we engage with our local communities throughout the process, and so this is why we're here this evening and asking you to take part in the consultation and to complete the service plan survey. Once we've consulted on the plan, the corporate assurance team then monitor progress and delivery of our service plan and report on a regular basis to our service leadership team as well as the Avon Fire Authority. So as I mentioned, it's really important that we get your feedback. So a link to the survey will be made available in the comments section. It really only does take about 10 minutes to complete, and it is your chance to give your views and your feedback. I know there have been some questions around, is it a worthwhile exercise to complete and will that influence the plan? Absolutely, every response that we receive is considered and feeds in not just to the plan but also the implementation of the plan as well. So we really do encourage you to complete it and also share it with anyone else in the local area. You have until the 14th of February to complete it, so save it for Valentine's if you wish. And yeah, as I mentioned, the link will be available. So I'll now pass on to Natalie, who's a member of our Community Risk Management Planning team. Thanks, Nat.
Hiya, my name is Natalie. I am one half of the Community Risk Management Planning team. Our role is mainly to gather and analyse all the background information that goes into building and developing the service plan. We do that using lots of different processes. We gather lots of different sources of information. We use this insight and this understanding, and most of all, something that's really important to us, particularly this evening, is the insight from our communities and the feedback we get from them. We really need to understand how our communities feel about their potential risks and what we can do to make them feel safer. The service plan is developed using a lot of background information. We start off by researching the political and social environment and trying to understand any external factors that may affect the service, may affect how we can serve our communities, and we consider potential threats and opportunities to our service as well, so whether they be financial, economic, whether it might be something through new technologies or through factors we can't control like the weather. But our main focus, and what we're here to talk about this evening, is our communities and understanding the risks to our communities. So we do this by understanding our local demographics, any changes over time, so The latest census results have been really interesting for us to review and incorporate those learnings into our planning for the next 4 years. We rely a lot on information from other emergency services and our partnerships that we have with the local councils, the Local Resilience Forum. We're constantly communicating with them and sharing our plans. We also use information from central government to get a bigger picture of fire and rescue response across the country. And also we try as much as we can to share other information with other fire and rescue services. We also look at our own incident data. We analyse trends in our incident profiles. We record as much information as we can at the time of the incident so that we can learn lessons from that for our operational response, and then also pick up any data that might give us information towards trends in incidents, anything that might be changing over time that we can potentially respond to. We also rely a lot on feedback from our firefighter crews, the information they gather right at the point of the time of the incident, and also their first-hand knowledge of the communities is really important. So all of our firefighting teams in stations have close links with their local communities. We rely on their feedback as well to incorporate that information into our plan. As well as all of that's happening right now, we also need to try and look forward to the future. So we look at emerging risks. Again, this could be coming from external factors like technology and the weather, or things that are changing within our local communities. So where our population is increasing, looking at bigger housing developments, how the styles and fashions of those housing developments are changing, switches in technology moving more towards sustainable energy sources, changes in infrastructure, new road layouts, and climate change and weather patterns and how that may affect us and our ability to respond to incidents and how those incidents may change over time. So this risk information is used to match our resources to risk in a number of different ways. So Steve mentioned prevention and protection teams. Our information is passed on to them for them to target their actions. We also use our risk register to prioritise our training activities for our firefighting staff, and we look at our incident profiles and locations of incidents on maps to plan deploying equipment and moving our resources around, checking that we've got our specialised rescue equipment in the locations where it's most appropriate. So all of that goes into our service plan. It's quite a lot when you say it like that. The service leadership team somehow use all of this information to determine our strategic objectives, which forms the underpinning of our service plan. And that is what we're currently consulting on today, is those strategic objectives. So I think now we're going to answer some of the questions that we've received so far through the survey. So I'll hand over to our colleague behind the camera.
I don't think there'll be many questions left to ask.
I'm sorry, I know, you shouldn't get me started.
On what she does.
So, Steve, there's been lots in social media and in the news about the service cutting firefighters to make savings. Can you explain a bit more about what this means?
Yeah, okay. As with any public sector organisation, we have a duty and responsibility to ensure that we provide value for money whilst balancing the books and addressing the risks that are identified by Natalie and the team. It's a relatively complex situation. In 2023, as part of our financial planning and forecasting, we identified that there was a forecast budget shortfall in the years ahead, and that's something we call the medium-term financial plan. So early in 2023, the service put in place a project team to start to explore how we could make efficiency savings while still providing the same level of service to the communities which they quite rightly deserve. So that project team came together and they presented a number of options to the fire authority, whose decision it is ultimately. And those options were narrowed down to 3 specific areas to explore further. And that was in the autumn just leading up to Christmas last year. And what that means going forward is the current things that are being explored is around how we resource and crew our whole-time fire engines but still provide the same level of service.
Lovely, thank you. And Natalie, how can you achieve what is set out in the service plan with less resource?
It's really this service plan cycle is for us about prioritising. So we've really focused on our objectives and the strategic actions underpinning those objectives to make sure that we're clear and focused upon the actions that we believe will give the greatest amount of improvement to our community safety while still allowing us to remain inside of our operating budget.
Thank you. And another one for you, Steve. Why can't the government give the service more funding to protect those firefighter posts?
Probably touching on what I said earlier, it would be lovely for the government just to give public sector bodies, all of us, more money to meet the challenges that lie ahead with inflation and the like. However, that's not the case. We have to find those efficiencies within our own working environment. So part of that is understanding how we have a budget. In essence, or in simple terms, approximately 35% of Avon Fire and Rescue Services budget comes from the government, but closer to 55% comes from council tax precepts. And then there's another 10% that comes from other small sort of funding streams. So with that, what we need to achieve, the biggest portion of our funding coming from precepts necessitates us to raise the precepts in line with what the government allow us to raise it. And currently that's been set at 2.99% for the year ahead. And what that means for Avon Fire Service is an extra roughly £300,000 comes into our funding. But from the members of the public perspective, what that means is they will, if approved by the Fire Authority, see an increase to their council tax by approximately £2.48 per year, or 5 pence per week. Ideally, we get more money from the government, but the way in which the funding mechanism is set, most of our funding comes from council tax precepts.
Thank you. And last year the service had an inspection and there were concerns raised. Is there any update on that?
Yeah, it's been well communicated last year, our experience with the inspection regime. We took the inspector's findings at face value, and we put a lot of measures in place to try and meet the expectations of the inspector. We recently had a revisit by His Majesty's Inspectorate, and the feedback has been very positive in relation to the progress we've made since that initial inspection back in the summer of 2023. So far positive feedback on our direction of travel. We've still got a lot of work to do, but we're committed to undertaking the work ahead and delivering a better service to our communities.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, the HMIC FRS inspections that we have are a key part of the feedback that we receive as a fire and rescue service. But also that's goes hand in hand with the very in-depth community risk analysis that's conducted. And all of this feedback and these recommendations have underpinned the service plan objectives that we've set for the next 4 years. So, really making sure that we are, as a service, prioritising those recommendations and ensuring progress is achieved. So, a really comprehensive approach that's backed up with annual action plans to ensure that teams can effectively monitor and report on progress. So that's just part of the planning process that we do.
Brilliant, thank you. And Scott, there's been some feedback that the objectives in the survey are quite vague. How will people know what we're actually going to do?
It's a good question, and the main body of the survey does include the high-level strategic objectives for the service, and that's our key aims and our vision for the next 4 years. But throughout the service plan consultation survey, there are links to the underpinning actions that have been put together that demonstrate how we're going to achieve those overarching objectives. In addition to this, as I've alluded to, there's also annual team plans that break those objectives down further into smart actions to make sure that we monitor and achieve the milestones that we set out. So at a very high level, it might seem vague, as some people have commented on, but really it is underpinned by a very thorough planning and review process, as well as monitoring and reporting. So the detail is there.
Thank you. And some people have commented that in the consultation that it seems that the objectives have already been decided. So what reassurance can you give local people that their feedback will be taken into consideration?
Thank you. Yes, this is a draft plan as it stands at the moment. The objectives are in their draft format. They've been presented to the Fire Authority for review and scrutiny, and this is the service's chance to get feedback from our local communities. And although there are high-level strategic objectives and aims, the feedback that we receive is vital to how we put together our implementation plans. Every response that we receive is read and ideally responded to in one form or another, and it really does support the development of our action plans that allow us to deliver our service plan. So although we are setting objectives for the next 4 years, those aren't set in stone. This is a dynamic process that we continue to engage with our local communities and take that feedback on board.
Thank you. And then our final question for this evening, Natalie. In one of the objectives about prevention work, we talk about being people being the most vulnerable, but people are interested in how we decide who the most vulnerable are.
Yeah, that can depend on the risk we're talking about. Obviously, we most commonly respond to fires, so those we deem most at risk to being harmed within a fire incident are can depend on age, mobility, access to life-saving technology such as smoke alarms, and the buildings they live in as well. Older buildings may be more prone to fires, so there's a number of factors we look at to determine who may be most vulnerable and who we're going to target at the top of our list with our home fire safety visits.
Thank you, and that concludes the questions.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Hopefully that's answered some of your questions, and if not, as Scott sort of alluded to, we're still the consultation is still live. Please do engage with it, and there's further information on our website. Thank you.